Good afternoon and a warm welcome to our event in the frame of our series on the European Mobility Atlas. My name is Eva van der Rakt and I am the director of the European Union Office of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in Brussels. Thank you for joining us today. Before we start our debate, please allow me one technical remark. This event is simultaneously translated into English and German. To switch the language, please click on the small globe icon at the bottom right of the Zoom bar and select your preferred option. In February this year, we launched the European Mobility Atlas 2021, which analyzes facts and figures about transport and mobility in Europe. The Atlas outlines best practices and policy recommendations to achieve a sustainable, inclusive, and just mobility in Europe, with a focus on railways, cycling, digitalization, tackling the climate crisis and the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is available in English and we have good news. The Italian, Spanish and French versions are in the making. What is the state of railways and cross-border mobility in Europe? What is the future of the automotive, aviation and shipping sectors? What is behind the thriving bicycle industry and what are best bike-friendly practices in Europe? Last but not least, what is the role of digitalization? These are just a few of the questions raised in our atlas. Today, we will focus on one of the atlas' most important pillars, railways. As the backbone of a truly pan-European transport system, tomorrow's future-proof railways will need to boost the role of night trains as an eco-friendly, time-saving, and at the same time, beautiful way of traveling. This can, however, only be achieved with decisive steps to foster investments in our common infrastructure. Additionally, European mobility will only become sustainable if it is based on a fair competition between different technologies and carriers reflecting the true costs of transport. Thus, changing the regime of tax exemptions for cheap flights, for instance, would be a concrete measure to safeguard the fairness between different providers in the EU's mobility and transport system. In other words, we need a clear vision and ambitious political guidance for night trains to become an important vector of a climate-friendly means of transport on a large scale, connecting European capitals and European citizens. As passengers of the ongoing European Year of Rail, we feel very confident that this political momentum can help us to bring along the change we need. Furthermore, 2 days ago was Europe Day, and we could watch the inaugural event of the conference on the future of Europe. We are convinced that the conference can give important impulses for a sustainable mobility future in Europe, since many EU citizens and initiatives are in favor of a sustainable mobility transition and want more trains, night trains in particular. In closing, please allow me to thank our distinguished guests for accepting our invitation and Philipp Czerny for moderating our debate. He and my dear colleague Martin Keim are chief executive editors of our European Mobility Atlas. Philipp has worked extensively on the matter of night trains and European railways over the last couple of years and during his work for the Greens European Free Alliance Group in the European Parliament. I'm looking very much forward to a fruitful discussion. Philipp, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Eva, thank you very much for the kind introduction and welcome to everybody also from my side. I'm very happy to moderate this discussion on night trains. Our event today will be split into two parts. In the first round, we will hear from our panelists what they have to say on night trains in Europe. Thereafter, we will open the discussion for a Q&A. You can already ask your questions by clicking on the respective button on the bottom of your screen. The Böll Foundation has published an updated map of the most important night train connections across Europe, which you can check out and download on the European Mobility Atlas website, and which I would like to share with you during my following introductory words. This year, we are celebrating the European Year of Rail under the very special circumstances of a worldwide pandemic. Rail connections have been cut due to border closures and public health restrictions. Nevertheless, trains have proven to be a reliable means of transport, with most service providers running their connections at a pre-COVID level despite limited mobility among Europe's citizens. We are happy to see that night train operators are now also relaunching their connections that had to be cut short. But there are more challenges to cross-border night train. There are more challenges to cross-border night trains than border closures. Different technical and legal requirements across the EU's member states. Different signaling and electrification systems. Different track and loading gauges, just to mention the more obvious technical ones. I'm sure the panelists will address a few of them, including the elephant in the room, the track access charges. The German EU presidency last year came up with the idea of a Trans-Europe Express 2.0, including new very long-distance night train connections. The European Commission has launched a study for a pilot project on the revitalization of cross-border night trains, which is supposed to be published this autumn. Yesterday, 36 environmental groups wrote an open letter to the EU's transport ministers. Ahead of the Council's meeting on 3rd of June on the future of rail, the NGOs wrote that they consider the actions taken so far as too little, too late. They demand a minimum of 30 new Europe Express lines and night trains between 2021 and 2025. A funding program for interoperable rolling stock and sleeping carriers. Mandatory through ticketing for all rail operators. The earlier mentioned reduction of track access charges and the improvement of infrastructure. I'm curious to hear our experts' opinion on these actions and demands. Let me now introduce our speakers for this session. We have with us Mark Smith, known to most of you as the man in seat 61. Before starting his website seat61.com, which provides ample information on train travel across the world, he worked in different functions in the rail sector, such as station manager or at the UK Department of Transport. Veronika Haunold, EU and International Affairs Manager at ÖBB, Europe's biggest operator of night trains, or how they call them, the night jets. Her environmental policy background well fits into the idea of night trains replacing short and medium haul flights. Carl Adam Holmberg, head of Swedish open access operator Snälltåget. Snälltåget is operating several night trains in Sweden and will soon be relaunching the Stockholm, Copenhagen, Hamburg, Berlin night train. He will share insights on the chances and challenges for an open access operator. Last but not least, Anna Depanay-Grunenberg, Green member of the European Parliament and rapporteur for the European Year of Rail. Anna holds a German, French, and Swiss passport, and I'm pretty sure that she will travel to these countries and further by night train. Before I now hand the floor to our first speaker, Mark Smith, who will share with us his expertise over the developments of night trains during the past decades, I would like to remind you that if you want to listen to the German interpretation, you can do so by clicking on the respective globe button at the bottom of your screen. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip, and afternoon, everyone. Am I coming up on the screen?
Yes, you are.
Oh, that's all right. I can't see it here. Well, first of all, I think we forget just how common sleeper trains were in the period before budget airlines and, of course, high-speed trains. They were everywhere. If you travelled any distance, chances are it would involve an overnight train. And even as late as the early 1990s, I can remember 9 sleeper trains leaving London for Scotland every night, and 6 sleeper trains leaving Paris for various stations in Italy every night, including one in the summer down to Bari for the ferry to Greece. It was a part of everyday life. So the question is, what happened to all these night trains? Well, before we start, first, I think we need to acknowledge that the economics of sleeper trains are more difficult than, well, just about any other type of train. You need special rolling stock, sleeping cars, couchettes, rolling stock with beds. You only get one loaded journey out of that rolling stock per 24 hours, in contrast to a daytime train which can shuttle up and down all day. You're only really carrying end-to-end passengers where over long distances where budget airline competition is toughest. You can't really pick up intermediate traffic because, let's face it, nobody gets on at 2 in the morning and gets off at 3 in the morning. You only get 10, 20, 30 passengers in beds in a sleeping car when you can get up to 70 passengers in seats in the equivalent length of a daytime coach. And of course, you've got other costs such as high standards of cleaning, maintenance of all those, all that plumbing, showers and wash basins and so forth. So in some ways, the odds have always been stacked against the sleeper trains. But of course, the biggest thing to affect sleeper trains has been the growth of air travel. And in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, it was pretty much a slow attrition. When I started traveling in the 80s, we had a Brussels-Rome sleeper, but the Amsterdam-Rome sleeper, which was a 24-hour journey, had already gone. The longer the distance, the harder it was. But what really caused a problem, of course, was the arrival of budget airlines in the 1990s. Now, they have the advantage that there is no sales tax on international air tickets, even for journeys where the equivalent rail ticket has sales tax added on in certain countries. And they also pay no tax on their aviation fuel, which is like you or me filling our car up for half price fuel. And I gather that fuel can make up to 30% of an airline's cost, a very fuel-thirsty business. They also brought with them the concept of dynamic yield managed pricing, fares from 1999. And these came in at a time when the railways were still charging a kilometric tariff. So the sleeper from Paris to Rome, if you bought a ticket, it would be the distance in France times the SNCF French Railways tariff, plus the distance in Italy times the Train Italia tariff with a sleeping car supplement added on top. And whether that ended up anything like what the airlines were charging was pure coincidence. In fact, it usually didn't. It usually ended up as quite an expensive full flex rate when the airlines were charging cheap fares, yield managed, starting from a very cheap lead-in price. So that meant two things, of course. The railways, the sleeper trains lost traffic to the airlines. It also meant that they had to compete by offering their own cheap fares, which they have done. But that's got two effects. It means your revenue per passenger goes down as you're trying to compete. It's also where fragmentation of the booking systems came from, because up to that point in the 1990s, kilometric tariff meant tickets could be issued by almost any office anywhere in Europe. All you needed was a table of the different tariffs for the different countries, a set of blank ticket stock, and one of these, a biro. And I remember sitting in an office in the 1980s, issuing tickets from London to Istanbul on blank ticket stock with a biro, and it was easy. Now, of course, you needed to access the specific ticketing system of that specific operator in order to find the yield managed cheap fares for that particular train. And that's where we've got the fragmentation of the booking systems from. The next issue to affect sleeper trains was, of course, the rise of high-speed rail, which of course is a good thing for rail and for transportation, but it meant that a certain number of shorter distance night trains died what I think of as an honourable natural death. We probably don't need a sleeper train between Paris and Lyon anymore if it only takes 2 hours. Paris, Amsterdam used to have a sleeper train. It now only takes 3 hours and 20 minutes. So that's fine. But high-speed rail brought yet another challenge for sleeper trains, even on the longer distances, and it's this: you can't attach a sleeping car to the back of a TGV or ICE. And in many cases, the daytime rail network and the sleeper train network were intertwined. When we last had a Paris to Vienna sleeper, it left Paris attached to the back of an evening Paris to Strasbourg business train, which was great. It got a free ride. But in 2007, the high-speed line opened between Paris and Strasbourg. That train became a high-speed TGV running on the high-speed line, so you can't attach a sleeper to it. So either the sleeper trains had to support all their costs on their own as a train in its own right, or, as in this particular case, it started from Strasbourg and ran Strasbourg to Vienna. And of course, at that point, the writing was on the wall. It only lasted another couple of years. So that's been another challenge that night trains have had to face. And of course, it's not just high-speed trains, it's the increasing use of fixed formation trains with a nice little bullet nose at each end. Even on the classic routes, you can't attach sleepers to those either. So that brings us to the next challenge that they faced: track access charges, the elephant in the room. In the old days, and some people in Brussels are going to have to cover their ears at this point, vertically integrated operators ran the track and the trains. And they knew perfectly well that if the track and signalling was there, fully staffed, fully maintained, you could run 11 trains for the same price as 10. So the extra train, the sleeper train, effectively didn't cost anything to run in terms of infrastructure. As soon as you separate a company for running infrastructure and a company for running trains, a great big track access fee appears out of nowhere on the debit side of your sleeper train's balance sheet. That has been cited as a key factor in pushing some sleeper trains over the edge, including the Paris to Kiev sleeper train, for example. But you notice that all the track and signalling is still there, fully staffed. So you actually have to ask, what is the saving? I don't think there has been any saving in track between Berlin and Kiev. So why were they paying all these track access fees? So a major issue there. But the good news is that things are beginning to look up, certainly on the demand side. When I started Seat 61, whole of 20 years ago now, if people gave me a reason for traveling long distance by rail instead of air, they would typically say they had a fear of flying, or they were medically restricted from flying, or they just knew they particularly liked trains. And what they now tell me is two things in the same breath. They say they are fed up with the airport and airline experience, and they want to cut their carbon footprint. Now, I can't tell whether it's 80% the former and 20% the latter, or the other way around. It probably varies. But I think a key thing is that it's both of these things. So if we want to get people on the trains, it's about the experience as much as cutting one's carbon footprint. And basically, the message from me has always been, you're not suffering to do the planet a favour, you're doing yourself a favour as well. I think that's quite important to remember when we try and change people's, the way people travel. So, and I think it's also fair to say that what I see is a market for sleeper trains that isn't just young people, it's not just older people, it's not budget travellers or affluent travellers, it's the whole spectrum. Sure, they have different needs. What I see is people who are traveling as a single or a couple who've got more money. They want a single or double sleeper. What they really want is an ensuite shower and toilet. Families want 4 berths together at an affordable price. And the big issue for single travelers is, of course, that culturally, it's not quite as acceptable to share with strangers as it was when it was normal 40 years ago. And that's quite apart from the pandemic. That's been a trend that happened before the pandemic. So tackling the need for privacy but at an affordable cost is going to be a key issue for sleeper trains. So the market for sleeper trains is definitely there now. I don't think that is quite the problem. The economics are still difficult, but the good news is that Austrian railways have found a commercial model that works with a nightjet network, at least if the conditions are right. And they've been joined now by Snelltaget and RegioJet, who have done the same. And we've got open access operators, entrepreneurial open access operators such as Moonlight Express and European Sleeper waiting to enter the market. In fact, it's almost as if the main problem at the moment is a lack of rolling stock, which in one sense is a nice problem to have, but it still needs to be solved. But it's not all rosy yet. We are right now dealing with Renfe, Spanish Railways, threatening to permanently cut off Portugal from the rest of Europe because the only long distance trains into Portugal linking it with Madrid and with France are sleeper trains. So we need to make sure that certain things happen if night trains are to prosper. And I've touched on them already. We need to level the playing field between air and rail. If you are coming up with a policy to encourage air travel over rail, you've done a pretty good job in giving air travel a massive hidden subsidy with tax-free fuel and with the sales tax arrangement on rail tickets. We need to tackle track access fees for night trains. We also need much less fragmented, easier booking for night trains, in fact for all trains across Europe. And we need to make sure that passenger rights don't strand passengers where they book a sleeper train in connection with a daytime train and they're run by different operators. Buying separate tickets for separate trains is now a commonplace occurrence, and passenger rights need to change to reflect that, and they haven't been. It wasn't a successful change in this last round of passenger rights. And finally, of course, we need to tackle that shortage of rolling stock. One suggestion is a leasing pool of night trains, but it's going to be tough for new entrants trying to find rolling stock to start up sleeper trains. And with the high capital cost, it's going to be much more difficult to start up a sleeper train than it is, for example, to lease an airliner and start up a flight. Back to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Mark. Wow, you've given us a hell of a ride through the history of night trains, and I can see you've already raised a lot of questions. Thank you for being so outspoken. What's also not going exactly right when we talk about railways in Europe. You also, Mark, you also mentioned what travelers want in night trains. And that brings me to our next speaker, Veronika Haunold from ÖBB. She's going to tell us a bit more about the current market situation. You or your company ÖBB just placed a big order for new night train rolling stock. And this makes me especially curious what you think about this idea of an EU-funded interoperable rolling stock. Isn't that going against your just recently purchased or ordered rolling stock? And we've also heard about the demand of through ticketing. As far as I see, ÖBB is mainly operating with global prices. I'm sure you can share some insights on that. The floor is yours, Veronika.
Thank you very much, Philip. Let me just briefly open up my presentation. I'm very honored to be here to present ÖBB on our night train business. I'm a bit overwhelmed by the interest. It's a bit weird, you know, not seeing the audience, but I'm trying to do my best. I will give an overview about our current lines, state of play, and our future plans. I will also briefly talk about the challenges of setting up night train connections. But since there is simultaneous translation available, I will switch to German if that's okay for everybody. Because it's always better to speak in your mother tongue. And I think questions, of course, can they be posed in English or German? I don't mind. The presentation is in English, so you can at least read what I'm going to say. A quick overview of our night train business. We have, at the moment, 1.5 million passengers per year. We have 25 overnight trains. We have an 80% recommendation rate when we ask our customers. And as has been already said, climate change is one of the main motivations behind taking a night jet. And I forgot to change the language, I'm sorry. Bahnfahren liegt voll im Trend und das besonders Generation. Das freut uns sehr, weil das zeigt, dass wir in die Zukunft gehen, dass wir die richtigen
a hot topic, our trend, and this shows that we're going in the right direction.
Sorry, I'm doing something wrong here. Mach was falsch.
I'm doing something wrong here on the technical level, I believe. My apologies, says the speaker.
We can see your slides perfectly fine, Veronika.
Ja, okay. Das Problem ist, ich höre das Englisch und rede auf Deutsch. Das ist ein bisschen schwierig.
So the problem is I'll be hearing you I'm hearing the English while I'm talking in German, which is a bit difficult, but I'll do my very best.
So, lass mich ganz kurz bitte. Also unsere Entscheidung 2016, das Nachtzuggeschäft europaweit wieder hochzufahren, war also richtig. Nur muss ich dazu sagen, der Nightjet ist ein Nischengeschäft. Also eignet man mit dem Nachtzug nicht. Aber natürlich stehen wir hinter den Nachtzügen und sind stolz auf unsere Linien und wir möchten bis 2024 das Netzwerk auch erweitern. Der Nightjet ist also ein Teil des Gesamtangebots der ÖBB und wird auch in der Zukunft bleiben. Er ist besonders interessant für junge Menschen, für Leute, die mit Gruppen reisen und für Leute, die mit Kindern reisen. Ich denke, das hat viel damit zu tun, dass Kinder auch ein bisschen Bewegungsfreiheit haben im Zug und nicht nur ruhig sitzen
müssen. Because you can also move a little within the train instead of being more or less locked into your seat.
Ganz kurz zum Klimaschutz. Wenn Sie die Bahn nehmen statt dem Flieger, sind Sie 31 Mal grüner unterwegs. Und ich denke, das ist schon eine sehr
31 times greener in your travels, and that's quite a high number already.
Was ich Ihnen hier zeige.
Just a second. Can you please switch to the German channel at the bottom? Thank you.
Yeah, but I have to leave my presentation. Wait a minute. I'm gonna. Can I switch the channel?
Yeah, because you were in the English channel.
I'm sorry, but I can't open up the...
Apologies. Yeah.
This is not good.
At the bottom, there's the...
Yeah, ich weiß. I know where it is. I just can see it. That's my problem. I see my presentation, but...
Then I will unshare your presentation and you will have to start the presentation again. And now you can switch to the German channel. And now please open your presentation again. I apologize for this, but with the English channel, there was a very bad sound.
Nein, ich muss mich entschuldigen, der Fehler liegt bei mir.
My apologies, it's clearly my fault. I didn't change the channel originally and I couldn't find the button. So, where were we? Looking at our current network, Nightjet network to be precise, we're offering 3 classes, 3 comfort levels for different groups of passengers. One that is very cheap, which is seated place. Then you have sleeping places, and for people who want a higher level of comfort and more privacy, there is an actual sleeper car. Now, who will travel with our night trains? If we're looking at, for example, Brussels, Cologne, Berlin, these are mostly business travelers. And if we're looking at Rome, Venice, and Hamburg, it's mostly tourists. Other people who take night trains are people who work in all of Europe, who have to travel a lot for work, but want to regularly visit their families. Now, beyond climate reasons, the quality and favorable scheduling are very important criteria in favor of night trains. We're currently arriving a little late in Brussels, a little late in the morning, but this will change because the time you reach your destination is crucial. It's very important. For example, if you look at Krakow, that the train will be standing for a little bit in the middle of the rails, because you don't want to arrive at 3 a.m. You want to arrive at a reasonable time in the morning, have your breakfast, and get to work.
I think you will like it very much. Das ist das Nachtzugrecht in den 1990ern.
This is the night train network of the 90s. I had Interrail tickets in the 80s and I have great memories of that time, because you can clearly see how well developed the network already was. And I think at the time in Europe, this is not just ÖBB. This is where we want to get back to. It'll take some time. We all know this, but we want to have a huge offer, a lot of options for people who want to take night trains. Now, this is a bit of a view of the future. This is our goal for 2024. I don't know how many of you knew that Deutsche Bahn, SBB, SNCF are working jointly together very tightly. We have a lot of plans. The next train line we'll get in December 2021 will be Paris, Zurich, Amsterdam. 2023 we will have Vienna, Berlin, Brussels, Paris. This will be set up in an X shape. Vienna and Berlin will join up as well, and then it'll split again towards Brussels and Paris. Paris in December 2024, we will get Zurich, Barcelona. Those are our plans for the near future. And one more thing I forgot, that we will already see in May. At the end of the month will be a new connection to Amsterdam, Vienna, Amsterdam. We're looking forward to it. And like we said, end of the year, we will also start going Vienna to Paris. I'm going to get back to something that Mark Smith already spoke about, which is the level playing field. I'll be very brief because I don't want to repeat everything Mark said, but it has to be clear. And this, I don't want to limit this to the Nightjet or ÖBB, but I want to limit it. I want to really target greening, climate change. If transport as a sector doesn't change, we will not reach our climate goals. We have to lower emissions, and that cannot mean that we just use different fuels. No, it has to mean that we change our means of transport, and trains are the best alternative, are the alternative here. And what we need is fair competition. What we need is a level playing field. And if you look at the environmental chapters of treaties, there is the polluter pays principle. And that is in the treaties, but it's not applied. It's not happening. There is no transparency in cost, and there's no fairness in transport. And there are other words that we really have to mention while we're talking about this: tax on kerosene, infrastructure fees, value-added tax, discussions about a Eurovignette. There are so many levers you can adjust to make competition more fair, to create an actual level playing field. On a national level, we have the same situation. There are also regulations that need to be changed in order to make competition in transport more fair. Be it about control or about security standards. And I would like to add a few more words about this specific topic, and allow me to take up a practical example to showcase this. Let's look at the connection Vienna-Brussels. We have a new train for this. So what do I have to pay attention to with this? If I want to cross a border, if I have a cross-border train like this, if I look at Vienna-Brussels, what kind of difficulties can I have? Now, the first problem that I can encounter is the ETCS, European Train Control System. It's a security system that most of you will probably already have heard about. And my colleagues from infrastructure is always telling me that they're still not speaking exactly the same language. There's not a lot of understanding. The ETCS is not quite compatible yet. And this is one of the most important elements to tackle so that this actually works and functions. Currently, it is the case that at the Belgo-German border, we have to change locomotives. And then, while this train is operating in Belgium, there is a national regulation in Belgium that train doors can only open on one side of the train. Side selective door control. So this is opening only the door on the side where the people will actually disembark from the train. There is no such rule in Austria or Germany. But I need rolling stock. I need a locomotive that allows me to follow that rule in order to operate in Belgium. So this is once again a particular national regulation. Between Aachen and Liège, I have particular requirements for load on axles that I also have to respect. So a Belgian locomotive cannot pull ÖBB wagons. We have to take a different set of rails too, and it'll take longer just to get to our goal. Other electrification systems add on top of that. So this can only be solved by having a multi-system locomotive. So that's not an easily solved problem. There are many smaller problems, be it axle load requirement, traction current systems. And all of this is additional cost and additional effort for a company in order to set up a night train connection. But let's move away from the problems. I would like to also speak about something positive. I've briefly mentioned it earlier. The 24th of May, we will once again connect Vienna, Brussels, and Milan. We're looking forward to greeting you on one of our night trains. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Veronika, thank you very much for your contribution. I think in one aspect I have to correct you, because I think you already ran a night jet to Amsterdam, because the Austrian contestant to the Eurovision Song Contest traveled to Amsterdam by night jet. I also really liked your map from the 1990s. That's the way we have to, that's something that we have to achieve again. Now that Veronika has told us about the work of a former state aid or a actually still state-owned operator. Let's move on to Karl Adam Holmberg from Snelltåget, who will tell you more about running night trains as an open access operator. As for Veronica, we are curious about Snelltåget's take on an EU-funded interoperable rolling stock and through ticketing. Karl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. And once again, thanks for having me. First of all, I must say that it's truly very good to know that not at least some of our other operators do really look forward to get some competition in this field, because I think that's really one of the keys to be successful in the night train segment. And I'm also welcoming the great interest in this segment that many people want to try to find this kind of sustainable mean of travel, and it's both from the public but also from the politician, not at least during the last couple of years. And I mean, the pandemic affected the development, of course, but one thing is for sure: there will be a day after tomorrow. Sustainability is important and central, both with regard to climate change and with regard to finding long-term solutions. Now is the time to agree if we would like to have a real shift into rail or not. Are we willing to set aside short-term solution, what I call painkillers, and instead find a remedy by removing the obstacles blocking development, not at least when it comes to cross-border trains? Are we willing to stimulate competition and new ideas instead of blocking it? Competition in, for instance, Sweden and the Czech Republic have resulted in higher demand, more passengers and lower price, also in the night train segment. That is a fact. It is also very fascinating to compare the overall development in the passenger rail industry between two Scandinavian countries. Have a look at Sweden and Denmark, where Denmark has more or less no competition at all. During the last 5 years, the number of train trips in Sweden has increased with over 20%. And in Denmark, we see a decrease of 3%. So in other words, competition is one of the key factors. Are we willing to agree on fair conditions, such as supporting open access alternatives? If public procurement is needed, competitive tenders should be used. Are we willing to stimulate the railway through, for instance, lowered infrastructure fees? I mean, we have been talking about it already a couple of times. And another topic is that open access or the commercial alternative should be the first option before procurement is considered. Are we willing to let the customers, including potential customers, of course, define what they want instead of letting the politician do so? For me, it's clear that I would like to have the remedy instead of keeping on with a lot of painkillers. As I mentioned in the previous slide, it's about time to prepare for tomorrow. For me, it's clear that we need to find long-term solutions. We can't continue with quick fixes or painkillers. We need to remedy the obstacles instead. The European railway market has been opened up for competition for a while, in theory. In reality, it is something else. We could spend years in analyzing the night train situation in Europe and why we can't see more night trains running across Europe today. The quick answer is that we are stuck in old truths saying that it's not possible to operate night trains without subsidies, which is actually no longer true. We can see commercial initiatives in several countries where night trains are operated without subsidies. We, as Snelltåget, is one example. Anyhow, we need to leave history behind us and look forward. Politicians across Europe agree that we need to treat the European railway market as a single market. I fully agree with this. Now we need to make the vision of a single market into reality. What is Snelltåget, for which I'm responsible? Snelltåget is compared to the incumbents, and I mean that means the state-owned railway companies or the former monopolies. We are a small operator without subventions. We operate day and night trains since 2007. We are a small player, but we are part of the French-German global mobility company Transdev. Snelltåget is at this time the only company operating night trains between Scandinavia and the rest of Europe, a service we started in 2012. We also run domestic night trains in Sweden on an open access basis since 2007. We invested in some new night train rolling stock for international services in 2019. We will now launch an improved service connecting Stockholm, Malmö, Copenhagen with Hamburg and Berlin, mentioned before by both Mark and Philip. And we will do it without subsidies. So we're not just talking, we're actually doing it. And satisfied customers are key for us. And we always ask our customers and potential customers how to develop our service. It is definitely one of our success factors. What are the challenges facing international night train? I think I share some of those things that were mentioned by Veronica from ÖBB. According to the incumbents, night train needs subventions to operate. And I think it's fascinating to hearing this message from the incumbents, while they honestly speaking have failed in being successful in this segment. Companies like us, once again, Snälltåget and also Czech-based RegioJet are examples of railway undertaking running customer-focused international night train without subventions successfully. So once again, you need to understand the customers, and then you also see that there is a variation in demand. Demand varies during the week, and there is also a seasonal effect. I mean, who want to go to a ski resort during fall or to Brussels on a Friday night? If you understand the customers in what they are willing to spend and what comfort they want, then night trains can definitely be profitable. If you think outside of the box in your concept and optimizing the production and use of the rolling stock, then night trains can also be profitable. And whether the condition will be improved, which is somehow a political issue in terms of lowering the infrastructure fees, for instance, the infrastructure fee itself often corresponds to more than 25% of the operational cost. With lower operational cost, more night train will operate, also when demand is lower. So let me summarize my presentation and somehow my vision as well, and share some key activities how to best develop the night train market at lowest cost and best impact on the climate. Number one, most important, act with a long-term perspective with the customers in focus. Do not create new monopolies and block the market competition, because else we will end up in fewer trains and higher costs, which is not helping the climate at all. We need to move the single European railway area concept into reality. We need long-term conditions, which has been mentioned already by Veronica. I mean, signaling system, harmonized languages, working rules, national regulations, etc., making it easier to operate cross-border trains. We need fair access rules. I definitely think that international trains need to be prioritized. If not, there will be no real shift into rail, because departure time, arrival time, and travel time are key. Another important topic is to stimulate the development through lowering the operational cost. Significantly reduced track access fees for international trains would support competition, lower the ticket prices, and end up in more trains on our European networks. So what will the future look like? More painkillers, or are we willing to remedy the obstacles? I'm definitely willing to remedy the obstacles or be a part of it. So thank you for listening. Over to Philip again.
Carl, thank you very much. Now it's to the politician to respond, actually. Anna, I'm sure there are enough questions that have already been raised by the speakers that you would like to respond to. Carl specifically mentioned the single European railway area. I think one topic you can address is whether there's actually a lack of legislation on an EU level, or whether it's not rather the problem of implementation by the member states that don't carry out what's been decided on the EU level, or what would help to run trains across borders. One extra question for you. You are the rapporteur for the European Year of Rail, and quite a few fellow MEPs tried to make 2022 the European Year of Aviation. And I'd like to be a bit provocative. If that becomes reality, wouldn't the European Year of Rail be purely window dressing? Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Philip. And first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and all the input and insight till now. I learned a little bit more each time, and I already dreamt a lot. As you, I cannot wait to take the night train again. And yeah, how great it is to travel by night train from Munich to Brussels. I did it a lot of time in the past, or from Freiburg, where I have a local Europe office, to Berlin, where the colleagues from the Bundestag are, or from London to Inverness with the Caledonian sleeper. I had a lot of good souvenir on that. I have really a clear vision, and I think we are all sharing that, of a connected Europe in the future through night trains, where we are acting to make the Green Deal becoming reality. But also, meanwhile, this kind of transport, we're going to meet different people at the board restaurant in the evening, students working on the perspective of climate change, business people exchanging their point of view about this huge cultural transformation that decarbonization is. And so the night train could really be a great mode of transport, connecting us geographically, but also an interesting meeting point for exchanging our ideas. And to start with your question, Philip, yeah, my slogan for the Year of Rail was always a year of rail, yes, but please in the right way. More as just the marketing. And we tried to put more budget in. It was not accepted by the member state. We put a lot of political ideas in, we heard now, and the member state was not so keen on to broaden it out. We will make the best out of it. And I pushed with a lot of members of the sector, the extension, the idea of the extension to the year 22, to see the post-corona travel fever I hope we will have realized by trains and not realized by aviation. And we think that a year of aviation give a wrong message in those times of climate change. And so we had enough bailout for the aviation sector, and most of the time not even with any binding climate conditions. So at the same time, for example, no bailout for Eurostar. And so I think we can see that the Year of Rail proves that the rail is back on the political agenda, but we have to keep working on it, that it keep on this level. We had serious discussion in the Council about the future of rail. We have a lot of actors in the European Union that are really facing that the future of rail need a lot of strength political decision, systemic ones. And we see this as a window of opportunity. Rail must be the backbone of a sustainable mobility, and we need a real modal shift. So in the passenger trades and in the freight. And yes, Mark, the demand is increasing, as you said. I think there is a kind of point of awareness coming up, not only the flight chain, but a kind of awareness that you can travel in another way, and that's good for climate. And so we should see that people are looking for those sustainable alternatives. And at the same time, I agree that night trains are more difficult to run, and the EU has to help to overcome the obstacles. So I brought the main obstacle with me and to discuss them with you. The first of it is, of course, the fair competition between transport mode, this level playing field, what is lacking now. So I agree you. Internalization of external costs, that's what we really need. We had it in the white paper 2011. We have it in the smart mobility strategy, but a little bit weaker. We are at the Green putting forward, we need a kerosene tax. We could see the Eurocharging directive as an important tool, so to charge also the road and to earmark some revenues to make sustainable modes of transport cheaper. So for example, train. And of course, we have to think about the tax that are really unfair in these times of Green Deal. And the second obstacle we see is the support, the opening of new routes by providing startup funding so that new routes can be established. That should be done, and that's not done. That's an obstacle. So I see on the public service obligation, PSO, that the speakers have different position here. And as night trains are expensive to run, I feel that not every time and everywhere night trains can run without state aid, but this should be the exception rather than the rule. And I think that it's really important to make a leverage in the market and to open the public procurement. So that could be a good way. And I hope that the ongoing study that the Commission will present after the summer will provide some answer on the possibility to make this this level playing field and this opening from the tendering. The third one I wanted to address, of course, it's the elephant in the room, the access charges. The member states have the possibility to decrease the charge already. A few of them did. And we see that the member state have the possibility to count not the full cost, but the macroeconomic cost. And that's when you are looking to CO2 emission, you could see the macroeconomic cost really, really different. And so to lower the access charge, and so to make it even in a liberalized market really fair for some new tracks. So, and the first one I wanted to share is, of course, and we hear it, it's a through ticketing and all about the information. We need simple booking. Passengers need easy to find information on night trains and easy online booking options. And it's too difficult to find and to book night trains today. And Mark, I know you have a wonderful website, but there must be another way to find a night trains connection all over Europe. So we are working hard on that. The request of the right passenger rights was a real missed opportunity. We had a lot of support from NGOs to make that better, but unfortunately we didn't succeed this time. We cannot wait anymore the sector to put an instrument on the market. That's the way the Commission wants to do it. Ask the sector to put a new platform. When you see what is possible with the digitalization, to have information, it's really a pity that we cannot have that on the train sector. And so we began to push for a public EU platform on information and on ticketing, because we see the sector is not wanting or able or to put this really good platform that we need for every citizen on place. And we have to push better technical harmonization, of course. That's really technical work to realize a single European railway area. ERTMS, as we heard, is one example where we have to do better. But we have also to clean up the national rules, which often create obstacles for night trains. So we have the topic on the language for the drivers, but we have also all these topics for the specific requirements for locomotives and so on that each member state has. And so we have really to do our job as a European Union and to clean up those national rules without lowering down the security on anything else. The ERA, the European Railway Agency, should, in my point of view, be strengthened just to do this job, to look at all the different problems we see on borders. But unfortunately, the budget was cut for the ERA, and it's not helping to get there now. Another point is a rolling stock. We have it a lot of time. That's seemed to me the biggest obstacle. Maybe a pool of rolling stock could help, but many questions are open. We tried to put this really concretely in the recovery form for the post-corona area. We know that few members are putting that in their national plan. That's really good to help new rolling stock to come out. We have also the idea that we want to push for the European Investment Bank to make those really sustainable credits. And I ask here in the audience if you have an idea how we can go further to make this new industry coming up with new rolling stock. For all examples we heard from high luxury with Wi-Fi towards maybe cheaper and more for other way to travel. So we need, I think, a lot of different kind of rolling stock. So we have the pilot project, as I mentioned, initiated by our group, Greens EFA, and the study is now ongoing, and the results are coming after the summer. And I hope we will get some further answer. So that is what I brought with you. We had a lot of work to do. What it's wonderful now that we all together, I think we put the new idea of the night train as a connected way to travel in Europe really above in the agenda again. And a lot of people at the highest level of the European Union are just taking those words in the mouth now. So it seems to trickle up to those who we hope are going to help us to make this reality. And just to end my short presentation, I want to have some questions to you, because I think it would be really interesting also for me to know from the ÖBB and from Snelltech what is the biggest obstacle for night train in their view, just the first one we should tackle. And if they think that we need an EU-wide control authority to allocate tracks to night train operators, because that's a real question we are asking ourselves. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your question and remarks.
Thank you, Anna, for your valuable input. Wow, we already have more than 40 questions in our Q&A, but we also have more than 350 participants listening in to what we are talking about. That shows a real big interest in this topic. We already received a few questions in advance via social media, which I would like to start with. The first one is to what Karl elaborated on. It's about the new Snelltåget Stockholm to Berlin connection and why the Danish mainland is left out. So no stop in Kolding or somewhere else. Traveling from Jylland all the way to Copenhagen in order to catch a night train does not seem to be too practical. Another question, I'll try to group them a little bit, that was also addressed to Mark, is about running the night train from Stockholm to Berlin all year round. What would you need to do so? Would you consider that viable possibility? And we also had a comment from a transport researcher from DTU in Copenhagen. She commented that what you stated about the Danish transport, Danish railway system was not completely correct, because it was the buses replacing trains that led to a decline in train connections all over Denmark. So I would now hand the floor to you, Karl.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you for all questions. And I can start with the last. I think that's statistics from provided by, I think, the Dansk Industri, I think it's called. So, and I'm not sure about the situation with the bus replacement service in Denmark, but I'm quite sure that we had, unfortunately, some bus replacement in Sweden as well. But nevertheless, I think the message was that we had a bigger development, I mean, a more positive development in Sweden compared to Denmark, which I think was my main message. And coming back to, once again, Denmark, and I really like getting questions from Denmark, because Denmark is definitely a very important market for Snälltåget, and especially it's been a very important market for a long time, actually, but especially now when we will start our new routing via Denmark instead. And of course, all people from all around Denmark are more than welcome to use our trains, and we don't want to disqualify someone, and I don't want someone to feel like that. But why we're not stopping in Jylland during the trip between Stockholm and Berlin, I think it's mostly not. It's mostly because we have learned from our night train operation within Sweden that it's quite hard to have a good travel options, whether you will arrive maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. So that's why we don't really believe in that kind of arrival time when we go northbound. So whether there is a demand for that kind of connection, we will definitely consider making a stop in Kolding or so. But that's the simple answer, to be honest. And coming back to the question whether we were willing to operate on a daily basis between Stockholm and Berlin, actually we are planning to operate on a not that far from a daily basis next year. We have applied for operation on more than 230 days next year. And I still think that we need to consider that demand varies. So during some periods, we can't really see that there is a demand at this time. But as soon as we will see a demand, we will definitely put more trains and more departures in our schedule. So I think that's the quick answer. It's demand driven, and we can't really see at this time that there is a demand on 365 days a year on traveling by night train between Stockholm and Berlin. But please prove me that I'm wrong, and we will definitely be happy to put more departures in. But I also think that my message was that we need to have some conditions to be a little bit improved, to be able to operate night trains when the demand is lower. So if we could, for instance, have a positive development when it comes to the track access fees, for instance, then the possibility to put more departures in will definitely be better. So I think that's my very quick question on that topic. So thank you for good questions.
Thank you, Carl. But let me just say one thing in advance. The questions are piling up, and we probably won't be able to answer all of them in the remaining 25 minutes. We will collect them and try to get back to you with the respective answers. I would now like to follow up with a question to, again, the operators. I'd like to ask Veronica. We have a question from Germany saying Germany is not well served by night trains, and there's a German Bundestag election in September. The Green Party will likely form part of the new government. If you were to advise a future Green German transport minister what to do to start new night trains from Germany and not just to Sweden and Austria. So I think that's a pretty interesting question, since you also have government, I would say government, at least your president and your transport minister are traveling, as far as I can see, quite often by night train and by train in general. Veronica, would you like to answer to that question?
Yes, of course. Thank you. But first of all, my sincere apologies for the technical illiteracy that I showed at the beginning. Hard to give advice to Germany from an Austrian perspective because it's like a little bigger. But I think as a first step, you should probably look, as the colleague said, where is the demand and where is a good way to take train instead of a plane. Like we in Austria, we have this, the ministry has talked to the Austrian airlines, and they came to an agreement that around 300 kilometers, people should take a train and not take a plane. And I think the same thing probably could do in Germany, that these distances or these cities that want to be connected, we're going to start and propose a night train there. I also very quickly would like to say something to the question that Mrs. Tapranier posed to us. What would be the biggest obstacles for night trains? And I'd like to say that again, we need a level playing field. If we have a level playing field, you'll see what we can do.
Great, thank you very much, Veronika. There have eventually quite a few questions been piling up for Mark, so be prepared for impact. One that already came up on social media is if you could elaborate a bit further on the Lisbon connection, so the Portugal night train connections that you've already raised in your introductions, how you see the chances to actually keep Portugal connected to Spain, France by night train. We've heard that the Portuguese minister is pushing for that. Renfe, the Spanish railway company, not so much. Yeah, if you want to start with this question.
Well, first of all, the situation in Portugal is different from almost all the other night trains in Europe in that the sleeper trains from Madrid to Lisbon and the French border to Lisbon are the only trains, long distance trains, linking that part of Spain and France with Lisbon. There are no alternative daytime trains. So once they go, Portugal is cut off. And we've heard the Spanish politicians say we don't need night trains when there's high-speed trains. And of course, this is quite disingenuous because there are no high-speed trains between Madrid and Lisbon. So this is quite a serious situation in rail travel terms. An entire EU country potentially cut off from the rest of Europe, apart from one local service between Porto and Vigo and one 3-train combo between Lisbon and Madrid, taking 11 hours, requiring 3 tickets and 2 bookings, and including a 1950s rebuilt one-car rail car in the middle. So I think it's imperative that we sort out this situation. I know the Portuguese railways have been pushing hard to resume the trains. It is Renfe that doesn't believe in night trains and wants to stop them. And at this stage, I'm not sure what the answer is going to be. I know that Portuguese railways have been looking at whether they can run the train as an open access operator in their own right, but in which case, what rolling stock do they use? That's going to be a problem.
Thank you very much, Mark. There are more and more questions coming in regarding the rolling stock. I'd like to raise that a bit as an open question. What are the challenges in this regard? I've seen a question asking why RegioJet and Snelltod are not running with proper sleeper cars, only couchette cars. And another question that I would say has been so far not not really been answered by both operators that we have present here, by ÖBB and by Snelltod, is what you think about through ticketing, because as far as I understand, you're both operating with global prices, which makes it difficult when we start talking about passenger rights and a ticket not only from Stockholm to Berlin, but maybe from Uppsala to Dresden. Who would like to answer here? Maybe since I mentioned the Swedish connection, again, Mark.
Well, people talk about through tickets quite a lot, but I think we need to decide exactly what we mean by a through ticket. I think there are several aspects and they can all be dealt with separately. The first is a seamless booking. And it ought to be possible in this day and age to seamlessly book a journey that consists of 2 trains with 2 tickets. It doesn't have to be 1 ticket, but both the ticketing systems need to be connected to one website that can sell the 2. We're also talking about pricing, because generally people have in their mind the idea that a through ticket is cheaper than the sum of the 2. Well, that's not always the case, and it's not necessarily the case, but you'd normally want there's lots of situations where you'd want a through ticket to be cheaper than the sum of 2 shorter journeys, because it needs to compete with a flight over the longer distance, and that's a fair point. The third reason you'd want through ticketing is passenger rights. What happens if train A is delayed and it misses train B, and you've got a non-refundable, non-changeable, miss it and it's a worthless piece of paper ticket for the onward train? And that's not necessarily about having a through ticket. It's about passenger rights for making through journeys when it's necessary to buy 2 tickets. And I think, in fact, I'm dead sure that it's in all the rail operators' own commercial enlightened interests to have a system like that, because they will avoid bad publicity by families having to pay hundreds of euros for new onward tickets if they're not to be stranded, and it's going to open up commercial opportunities, because you can now sell tickets with sensible connection times for through journeys, where if you've got separate tickets and the passenger is carrying the risk of a misconnection, you sort of need to allow 2 or 3 hours between trains. So what's the point of building a high-speed line to save half an hour when you now need to spend 2 hours sitting around at the next station between trains to make sure you don't miss the onward train? So there's several issues there, and I think they could be solved without necessarily requiring through tickets between every station. I mean, who would actually set a through ticket between Helsinki and Palermo?
So, Carl and Veronica, I think now it's up to you as operators to say something about that. Carl, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I can start. Thank you for the question, and I totally agree, first of all, with Mark that we need to define what we mean with through ticketing. I mean, we have been looking at this topic for quite a long time, and I mean, for instance, within Sweden, we have a system which is through ticketing for domestic trains and buses and so on. So I think we have looked at how could we find a similar solution for the European level. So that's definitely something to have a deeper look at. But I think we have been finding solution for some destinations across Germany and so on. So I think it's possible, but it's of course a little bit more complicated, and especially it's more complicated when you look for connections to a certain night train, because most likely there is not a number of night trains departing from one country to another. So it's most often 1 or 2 night trains. So I think that's the most critical part if you have a very tight connection and the second train is a night train. So then you need some margin, and then unfortunately you need to have some spare time in our case in Berlin or in Hamburg, most likely. I think it could be possible to find a solution to buy one ticket from Helsinki to Palermo, but I think it's a quite long trip, to be honest. I think that's also one aspect that we need to keep in mind, that in some cases people want to define that Europe is very close, going from the northern part, I mean from Sweden or from Finland all the way to Portugal or whatsoever. And I think that's not really makes sense to spend maybe two days and 2 nights on a train. I mean, there is some demand for that kind of journeys, but I think that demand is quite low, and then I think we need to be reasonable. But definitely we need to find a solution for trains going between countries. I mean, like going from what you mentioned, Philip, from Dresden to Uppsala, for instance. But there is something more to do there, definitely. I don't know the view from Veronica. Maybe you have some view from your side to add.
Indeed. So let's hear what ÖBB is going to say about that. Veronica, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have to do better. But I think there are two problems that haven't been mentioned yet. First of all, it's the data and the interfaces. Because the companies have to speak to each other, so we have to develop interfaces that data can be compatible, and we have different systems. And once we have that, and we already have pilot with other companies, and that works pretty well, then it will be much easier. And the second thing is it has to be contract-based between companies, because that is what Mark raised in the beginning. If something happens, who is reliable? And this question of reliability is very important. So if you get a through ticket or you get 2 tickets, I totally agree. It doesn't have to be 1 paper, it can be 2. But if you can book a ticket on a website with different companies from A to B, there has to be a contract behind it that sorts out in case there are problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Now we have also a few questions coming up for Anna. One pretty specific about an interview that Josef Doppelbauer, the head of the European Railway Agency, gave, where he asked in the German newspaper Die Zeit to create a kind of Eurocontrol, what we have for the aviation sector for railways. Anna, do you have any take on that?
Yes, I can answer. I cannot start my video because the host stopped it, but I can give you just the answer with my voice. Okay, now I'm allowed to start my video again. Okay, hi. Yeah, I've read the article, and we were in fact more keen on developing the existing agency we have, the ERA, because we have already an agency, and we could give them some more power, some more possibility and capacity to do the job, and to fulfill this idea of this European rail area. So as I said before, we need to tackle the differences in the different countries. We need an agency looking at the missing links between the countries, because sometimes it's just really some few administrative burdens to build a new project, and not so expensive that the big ones, like we know Lyon-Turin or something like that, but we can, with a few less invest, do really better connectivity. And so that's a project we have also mentioned in the year of rail, and we want to see in the future, we want to see a connectivity index in Europe. So we are really seeing each euro we are investing, for instance, with a CEF, with the Connect European facility, which each euro is going to be really making a progress for the whole network. And so not investing just in megalomaniac project in one country, but really investing in the borders. And we see that in all this topic, the ERA could be this agency. But of course, we are open. We are just 10% of Greens in the European Parliament, so we are open to other ideas from the colleague and to discuss that to make this dream true. That we can have once this level playing field on the one side, and of course the infrastructure following.
Anna, thank you very much for your input on that. We are coming pretty close to the end of our seminar. There are obviously still dozens of questions open. As I said, we are trying to collect them and find answers to them. I would like to give all panelists the chance to say a few last words. I'd like to ask you two questions. One that I just picked up in the chat, which I find pretty interesting, and that is, why is the train lobby not as strong as the airlines? And we all know that the airlines got billions of bailouts because of the impact of the COVID pandemic on their business model. What is holding the train companies back? The pandemic and future traveling would certainly be a plus for the Green Deal. And I'd like to complement that with a question from my side. I would be curious what you think that the night train network should and will look like in, first I wrote down 10 years. I know when we talk about rail, everything takes a bit longer. So what does the night train network look like in 20 years? If you would like to answer both the questions in the last round, and I would just follow the same round that we have had for the introduction. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Right. Well, I think on the first question, the airline network thinks globally. The rail network is fragmented and tends to concentrate on its core routes, which are often national, not international, with a few honourable exceptions like OBB and its Nightjet network. So I think that's the key. It's fragmentation in the rail industry, and there are many journeys, such as London to Frankfurt, which involve two operators, and neither operator is necessarily focused on that overall picture, whereas the airlines most certainly are focused on flights between London and Frankfurt. Big difference there, I think. On the second question, what would I like to see? Well, I suspect OBB's new Nightjet trains will set a new standard in European travel. They seem to address all the markets that I see, the affluent and the budget, the couples, families, and so forth, and individual travelers. And I would like to see a network involving a lot more open access operators, expansion of RegioJet and Snälltågets route with access to similar quality rolling stock. That's what I see as the future of night trains, playing a key role in connectivity across Europe.
Mark, thank you very much. Now on to Veronika.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, I totally agree with Mark. That is the problem. Historic-wise, we still in some part we still think too nationally and definitely not enough European. But I think it's changing and we're making progress. But yeah, we have to become stronger. There's no doubt about it. But I hope with the discussions are currently going on with the Green Deal, there's an incentive that if we all roll up our sleeves, we're going to get there. train network. Well, I think I showed it in my presentation. I want to have the same network that we had in the 1990s, more or less. And I think it is possible. When we get the support we needed, when the aims of the Green Deals are taken serious, when Europe comes to the common conclusion that we have to shift traffic onto the railways, especially also freight, so not only passenger freight is a big problem as well, then we could get there. Yes, I'm definitely optimistic, not because it's my job, because I think that people will take the train and will take the train more often. Thank you.
Carl, your take on what to do better in lobbying, and what does the railway network, the night train network, look like in 10, 20 years? Yeah,
thank you, Philip. And I think in most points, I think I totally agree with Veronica and Mark. I definitely think that we have been treating the railway to be too nationalistic, and that's actually a problem. I also see, I mean, we see other aspects of this kind of treating it very national. I mean, we can see the border situation, which is not a problem in the flight industry, but it's really a big problem when it comes to railway, and not just during the pandemic. It's a kind of old way of handling trains still, and whether you are forced to let your passengers up during the middle of the night because you're reaching a certain border, I think you will never have the real shift into rail. So I think there is a big amount of question which is not only related to tracks and fees and so on. It's also a matter of how we see the European map and market. So I think that's for me at least a very central question. When it comes to the future network, I would be more than happy if we could see a lot of networks popping up. And once again, I'm very sure that whether we will find these kind of obstacles being solved or remedied, which I mentioned in my presentation, I'm sure that we will see more options. We will see different kind of solutions, and we will see a much bigger network as well. So I would say that our citizen and our customers are the one telling us where the trains would be running in the future. So it shouldn't be me or someone else. It should be the public or the customer. So thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Anna, you're on the receiving side of the lobbying, so you can definitely tell us, or the railway operators, what they can do better in lobbying, and we're also curious to hear what you imagine for the night train network in 10, 20 years.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I have here the best of lobbying I can imagine for our purpose. So just go further with that. Now, I think that the sector should be maybe more strong on putting forward that we must, if we want to tackle the Green Deal and the climate change, we must be able to put forward the principles of the economy of the common good. So that we are subsidizing or pushing forward, and that we don't want, we are not subsidizing anymore, the do not harm principle. And looking that the transport sector is really the one we have to win in the next years, I think that the train operator and all the sector should be really proud of what it's already being done, but also really ambitious on what politics should do to make this shift to rail real in infrastructure, in rolling stock, in digitalization, and really be strong on that, and we will support that. We must be aware that the people and citizens in Europe are really diverse, and so we need diverse solution. And yeah, if I may have a look on the future, I think that our climate youth, the young generation now, see that the problem we are facing are not national at all. So they don't care about borders, And so I hope that the future of rail will be a really continental one, with a real geographic map, with a real continent, the real borders that are water, but not the men and women made borders from the past. And so we can really get to an incredible good network and to travel and to connect through night trains as a citizen of the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Anna, thank you very much. I think those were basically perfect closing words. We are really at the end of our seminar now. I would like to thank the attendants for participating and the interest in the Heinrich-Böll Foundation's work on European mobility. Stay tuned for upcoming articles and events. We are planning an event on e-mobility and batteries on the 22nd of June. And I would also very much like to thank our interpreters and our team in the background, namely Martin Keim, Joan Lanfranco, Anna Tryczynska, and Konstantin Lehnert, who have been helping me to moderate this session. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye-bye.